Hello students. In today's session, we shall continue the second example pertaining to homologous organs, which acts as the evidences of organic evolution under comparative anatomy and morphological evidences. Well, we have understood in the previous session the concept of homologous organs. We know that homologous organs are the similar structures or organs which will have similarity with the basic plan and even the origin, but they differ with the functional aspects. So structurally, the organs will remain similar. Functionally, they vary. Such organs are called as homologous organs. So that way we have understood the first example that is prescribed in your syllabus is forelimb of vertebrates, especially tetrapods. In today's session, we are going to understand the second example pertaining to homologous organs, that is trophi or mouthparts of insects. Mouthparts generally refers to the parts of the head that assist in the process of intake of food into the mouth cavity. In case of insects, the mouth parts are involved in the intake of food to reach the mouth, and they also assist in the breakdown of the food. So the structural organization of these mouth parts remains common for almost all the insects, but they differ with their function. The reason for the difference in their function is the organisms of insects will feed on different types of the food. So the food varies in the organisms of insects, so the variation in the mouth parts can be seen thereby. So when we look at the picture down in the slide, you have the different insects along with their mouth parts or trophi. They are slightly modified, and this modification of parts or basic parts is mainly because of the type of food what they intake. So this is what we find in the trophi of insects. Based on the food habits, the mouthparts of insects are majorly classified into two types. Number one, chewing and biting type. Number two, sucking type or haustellate type. Chewing and biting type of mouthparts are seen when the food is solidified form. So when the food is of the solid type, chewing and biting type of mouthparts are seen. But when the food is either in the semi-solid form or in a liquid form, they require the second type of mouthparts called as sucking type or haustellate type. The sucking type is further divided into the following types that are prescribed in your syllabus. The first one is piercing and sucking type, condition wherein first the organism's mouth parts are pierced into the body of other organism and sucks the content of the food. The second one is siphoning type. So it is like a straw, it places the mouth parts into the liquid and just sucks it. So we call it as a siphoning process. Like how we suck the solution in a straw, in the same way the siphoning type is also seen. The third type is sponging type. Here, the food particle available for the animal, either in their liquid form or in their solid form, will be converted into ultimately a liquid form and later it will be taken in. So conversion of solid into the liquid form of food is brought about by their saliva itself. So organism will pour upon the saliva over the food and then it is converted into liquid matter and then liquid food is later taken in. So all these three types refers to the sucking type itself. So remember, based on the type of food what the insect feeds on, we have two major types, namely chewing and biting type for the solid food, sucking type for the liquid food. Under sucking type, we have piercing and sucking type, siphoning type and sponging type. So we are going to understand each of these types of mouth parts in detail now in this session. Generally, the first type, that is chewing and biting type of mouth parts. It is seen in the mouth parts of cockroach as well as grasshoppers. The kind of mouth parts what we find in cockroach that assist in chewing and biting type of food is considered to be the most basic parts that an insect should possess. So it is said to be primitive type of the trophy. So when we say primitive type, it is most basic type. So whatever the parts that you find for the mouth for feeding that you see in chewing and biting type of solid food, they are common parts which should be seen in the rest of the insects also. So that way, trophy of the cockroach forms the most basic structure that is seen in the trophy of rest of insects also. So what are the parts then? There are 6 major parts pertaining to the mouth parts of any insect. They are considered to be the fundamental parts, the basic parts. All these basic parts are seen in the cockroach or in grasshopper. The type of mouth parts is called chewing and biting type. So what are the parts that they have? Number 1, the upper labrum. We also call it as upper lip. Then we have the second part called as labrum epipharynx. That is, upper lip is continuing backside with the upper part of the pharynx. So labrum continuing with the pharynx inside the mouth cavity is called as labrum epipharynx. Epi means above. So in the pharynx cavity, the upper portion we call it as epipharynx. So upper lip that continues at the back, we call it with the pharynx is called as labrum epipharynx region. The third part is labium. Labium forms the lower lip of the organism. Now, they do have, along with these 3 structures, a pair of chitinous hard parts referred as the jaws. The jaws are provided with the sharp serrated teeth. So this chitinous hard structures which acts as jaws with the presence of teeth on it are called as mandibles. This is the fourth part. They are the true jaws present in the organisms. The fifth part is hypopharynx. Students, remember, hypopharynx is related to the tongue of the organism. So hypo means lower, so below. So the lower part of pharynx, where you find the tongue, is called hypopharynx region. Then the next part is the maxillae. Maxillae are the structures which assist in holding the food at the time of feeding. So they are assisting parts at the time of feeding. Like how our hands help, the same way these structures of maxillae also are helpful. In addition to all these structures, on the labium we find the attachments. They also assist in holding the food called labial palps. Students, remember, 6 major parts includes the upper labrum. The next behind the labrum is epipharynx, then lower labium, then we have mandibles, the fifth part is hypopharynx, sixth part is the maxillae. So these 6 parts of the mouth relates to the basic or fundamental parts of the mouth of any insect. So all the 6 parts are very clearly seen in the cockroach, excuse me, where we find chewing and biting type of mouth parts. So let us understand how the organization of each of these parts in the cockroach. So 6 parts we need to remember, students. Like you can compare it to the mouth cavity of human beings. We have 2 lips, upper lip, lower lip. Then we have 2 jaws. Then we have upper pharynx region. Then lower pharynx region continuing with the tongue. So similar to this is the organization of the mouth cavity of the animal also. So instead, since we have 2 hands to support the process of feeding, these animals have special structures called maxillae. Okay, so that concept you should bear in your mind. Now, how are each of these structures in case of cockroach? Number 1, labrum. So when you look at the diagram down in this slide, you have the central part which is rectangular with a flap like structure with a notch at the center is called as the labrum. So what is labrum? It is a median, the middle position part, which is roughly rectangular flap-like structure, meant to say fold-like structure with a notch at the center. It is attached to the structure of clypeus or scleroid of the head region. It is nothing but a bony part related to the head region to which this upper lip is attached. It shows, the structure of a labrum will show only upward and downward movement. If this is a flap-like structure of the labrum, then it will show only upward and downward movement, no sidewise movement. So like this, the sidewise movement it doesn't show. It will only show upward and downward movement. So thereby, it assists in holding the food. Okay, it helps in intake of food. So labrum is a rectangular median position flap-like structure which assists in holding the food at the time of feeding, and it shows only upward and downward movement. It's the structure which is attached to the head region, especially to the part called the sclerite or clypeus. Now, the second part related to it is labrum epipharynx. So this structure of epipharynx is present just at the back of the labrum itself. So when you turn the labrum back, you find a structure called as labrum epipharynx. So here in the picture it is not shown. So ventral to the labrum is the structure of the epipharynx, which is fused with the labrum. And this is a small membranous piece attached to the labrum itself, which helps in the organ, which helps in tasting the food. So this membranous piece behind the labrum has got certain of the taste buds attached to it. So these taste buds helps in the gustatory or taste function. So they are the organ of taste. So labrum epipharynx is the organ of gustatory or taste present in case of the mouth part of cockroach. So it leads into the back part called as the pharynx of the digestive system. Students, remember, so labrum epipharynx, they help in holding the food and tasting the food what they eat. So that's related to the second part of the mouth parts. The third part is the lower lip. The lower lip of the organism is the labrum. I'm sorry, the third part is mandibles. So we have understood about labrum, the first part. The second part, what we have understood, is related to epipharynx, and the third part is related to mandibles. Mandibles, as we have understood earlier, it is a pyramidal structure or triangular structure which is very hard, rigid. It is bearing sharp tooth attached to the inner surface of them. So down in the picture, on either sides of the labrum, you can find the position of these mandibles. So they have an angle where this angle of the labrum is provided with the condyles. You can see that in the diagram down. These condyles are attached to two sets of muscles. Muscles for bringing the two mandibles closer. So two mandibles can come closer with the help of the adductor muscles. Okay, that is inward movement. And second muscles that are attached to the condyle called as abductor muscles. So there are two types of muscles attached. One is abductor muscle, the second one is adductor muscle. Adductor muscles will add up these two together. Okay, inward movement of a collision movement of the mandibles is brought in. Whereas abductor muscles will bring about outward movement of or separation of these mandibles. So movement of mandibles front and back, that is inward and outward, is brought about by these two sets of muscles called abductor and adductor. I repeat, students, adductor muscles will bring inward movement of them and abductor muscles will bring in outward movement of the mandibles. So these muscles, as they bring in closure, proximity and collision of these mandibles and separation, in between there are fringe of serration provided with the teeth called denticles. Denticles are hard chitinous materials with the sharp edges. So in between where the food is present, these mandibles, when they come closer, when they come inward, show inward movement, they help in breaking the food. So biting and chewing of food is brought about by these mandibles. So in simple, we can say it helps in mastication of the food. So these mandibles show only the lateral movements, no front and backward movement. Labrum shows front and backward movement, whereas the mandibles will show only lateral movement, only sidewise movements, no upward downward movements. Okay, so that's the specialty related to mandibles. They are paired structures. Now these mandibles help in grinding of the food. When we very closely look at the mandibular inner surface, the upper part of the mandible towards the inner surface is provided with the chitinous teeth-like structures or sedation part. We call it as, this is the part which helps in breaking and chewing of the food. We call it as grinding part. Whereas the lower part is just the chitinous part. It's just the chitinous part. So these two parts are present for the mandible structure towards the inner surface. So the mandibles act as the true jaws of the insects. So we know jaws are provided with the teeth, which helps in the mastication of food, grinding of food. The same thing will happen with the mandible structures present in the cockroach also. So after we understanding labrum, then epipharynx, the third part mandible, the fourth part we understand is the maxillae. Maxillae are also called as first maxillae. They are paired structures generally seen on either sides of the mandibles. So here in the picture, you can see down the two structures which are extended. So right towards the right extremity, you have one of the maxillae which is enlarged, separated. These maxillae structures, as we have understood, they are the structures which helps in holding the food at the time of feeding. So they need to have some hand-like structures to hold the food, finger-like structures to hold the food. So each of these maxillae possess three major parts. Part 1 is down, cardo. Above that is stipes. So cardo is attached to the body. Stipes is vertically placed structure. So horizontally placed structure is cardo. Vertically placed structure is stipes. So this stipes towards its lateral side is provided with an extension. We call that extension as palpifur. So this palpifur attached to the stipes is said to be movable. And this palpur has 5 jointed segments. So 5 joints are present for the palpifur attached to the stipes region of maxilla. So this structure is also called as, palpifur is also called as maxillary palp because it is present on maxilla. It is a tactile organ. It helps in, they are the organs of sensation of touch, also sensation of smell. This structure of palpifur is movable. Now, the stipes towards the upper side, the stipes towards its free end consists of 2 bifurcations. One is called as serrated lecinia, the other one is smooth gallia. So gallia is present towards inner side, lecinia is present towards the outer side. So you can see Lecinia towards the inner side of the medial side, we call it is, and Gallia towards the outer surface, outer side, lateral side, we call it as. Now, this structure of Gallia and Lecinia are also a movable part at the free end of stipes, which helps in assisting the structure of the palp, that is palpifer. All these structures helps in holding the food at the time of feeding. So what is the general function of the maxilla? It helps in holding the food at the time of feeding. So this is about the structure of maxilla. So we have understood labrum, we have understood epipharynx, we have understood mandibles. The fourth part, the maxilla. The fifth part is labium. Labium forms the lower lip of the organism. It is initially forms two different structures. Later it unites to form a single structure as shown in the picture down. It has three parts, namely submentum from down, then comes mentum, then comes prementum. So submentum is the rectangular structure that attaches to the head parts. So submentum is attached to the head part. Then comes the prementum. Prementum. So this mentum. The mentum is also an rectangular extended part. Then comes the structure of prementum. So prementum is very special in case of the cockroach. I repeat, the structure of labium, the lower lip, is attached to the part which is attached to the body, we call it as a submentum. Then comes mentum. And the upper free region of the labium is called prementum. It shows a lateral paired labial palpifers. If palpifer is present on maxilla, we call it as maxillary palp. If palpifer is present on the labium, we call it as labial palps. Each labial palp is movable structure. So it is three segmented. It shows towards its inner side the structure called as glossa and paraglossa. So we have, in case of maxilla, Gallia and Lecinia. So homologous to that here is glossa and paraglossa. They together is called as a legula. They are again the sensory organs of taste as well as smell. So you can see the structural representation of all these parts down in the picture here. So we have understood maxillae, which helps in holding the food and pushes the food for the process of mastication in the mouth. The last part, the sixth part, is hypopharynx. As I told you earlier in the initial stage of the session, it is a single median tongue-like process. At the base of it, it has connection with the salivary duct. A common salivary duct will attach to the base of this hypopharynx. It's an elongated tongue-like structure. Why the salivary duct is attached down here? Reason is the saliva gets poured into the mouth at the time of feeding. So to digest the food, there requires the presence of saliva. The salivary duct is present at the base of hypopharynx region, so that it assists in the process of digestion of food. So when we look at all the 6 major parts, so all these parts helps the animal, the insect, to have easier process of feeding by using the mouth parts. So trophy of insects, insect of cockroach, is adapted for omnivorous feeding. Mean to say, it feeds on any type of food. Especially since they have mandibles well developed, the function of these structures, the mouth parts of the animal is, the organism is to chew and bite or bite and chew the food. So if you have understood very well the mouth parts of cockroach, slowly as they tend to get into different species of insects, there is slight modification in the 6 parts. Okay, so we are going to understand each of them one by one. The second insect that we are going to understand under trophy is the mosquito. So mosquito has the mouth parts called as piercing and sucking type. So they pierce, then they suck. Here also the mouth parts are modified basic structures that you find developed from a common ancestor. So based on the function, there is slight modification in these basic structures. So generally this kind of feeding is seen in dipteran insects like mosquito, where piercing of tissue of animals and plants, sucking of blood or plant juices respectively is done by both females and male mosquito population respectively. Here also you find 6 major parts of the mouth in piercing and sucking type. So labrum, epipharynx, labium, mandibles, hypopharynx, maxillary palps or maxilla. All these structures, all the 6 structures, as what you have seen in the cockroach, are tend to present here in the mosquito also, but the basic plan, when you look at, they're all elongated needle-like. So all these structures, whether it is labrum, epipharynx, labium, mandible, hypopharynx, maxillary palps, they're all elongated needle-like stylets. So down in the picture you can see the mouth parts related to the mosquito. All the parts are elongated needle-like. So that's the specialty here. So these structures which are needle-like and elongated brings in the function of piercing and sucking type of feeding. First part, the labrum. It is long needle-like. The second part, epipharynx. It is fused with the labrum structure. Long needle-like structure gets fused with the labrum. Now, the labrum epipharynx covers the labial groove dorsally from inside and forms a convex covering lid. Students, you should imagine here, labrum is long needle-like tubular structure, tube-like. This tube is externally covered over by another tube which is not complete. It forms like a groove. Okay, this structure is called as epipharynx structure above. Okay, so that's it acts like a lid over the labrum. So you can find a tube above which there is a half tube which is present called as epipharynx structure. Labium is also modified long tubular structure which is striped and fleshy. This tube has got a central hollow space and it helps in sucking the content. So it is equated to the proboscis. So the structure is also named as proboscis. So labium is the lower lip which is drawn to form a long tube which helps in the actual intake of sucking of fluid matter. So it is called as the proboscis. Then comes the labial palps. They are modified conical lobes attached to the tip of the proboscis. When you look at the proboscis at its tip, you have two modified conical shaped lobes attached to the proboscis. They are also called as labella. The function of this labial palps, which are attached to the tip of proboscis. If this is proboscis, at its tip there are two structures attaching. If they open, you find the structure of the proboscis attached inside. So this labella's function is they are tactile bristles. So they are sensory organs for the touch of the host. The next part are maxillae and mandibles. Both are present, but they are paired structures. The speciality of maxilla and mandibles is that they have fine saw-like structures or needle-like structures at the tip of them. So long elongated structures stripe, at its tip there are needle-like sharp edges. So these sharp edges are very accurately present in case of females. And these structures are said to be protractile and retractile. Mandibles are protractile and retractile. So how exactly they function? These mandibles will help in piercing the body of the host by using the sharp needle edges. They can move they can move upward and downward, so they are protractile and retractile. So after puncturing, it allows the proboscis to enter into the punctured area, start sucking the blood or the plant juice according to the sex of the mosquito. Now, the next important part, the last part is hypopharynx. Here, the salivary duct is associated to this part because it is a tongue. You have seen hypopharynx at the base in case of cockroach, attachment of the salivary duct. Similarly, here also, salivary ducts opens here. This saliva of mosquito, when they suck the blood, especially female sex of mosquitoes, they produce anticoagulants as well as anesthetic substances to prevent the solidification of blood. So blood needs to be remained in its liquid condition so that the easier absorption and sucking process can be done continuously. So in order to keep it liquid form, the anticoagulants are poured into the body of the host animal. So that's the importance of hypopharynx, where the salivary ducts are playing a vital role. So saliva is poured into the punctured cavity. Puncture is made by the mandibles and mandible structures, and proboscis will draw the blood, the food of the organism, into its digestive tract. So here when we look at, when you take the cross section of all the mouth parts, it appears to be like this. As I told you, the cover of C-shaped transverse groove is seen, showing the foot canal or foot channel. Mandibles, maxillae, hypopharynx, they are modified, elongated stylet structures with needle-like tips, which helps in the actual process of feeding. In case of male mosquito, excuse me, mandibles are generally absent because they feed on the plant juices. Whereas in case of females, these structures are very well developed in order to puncture the body of the host. The third insect that we are going to understand is the mouth parts of butterfly, which we call it as siphoning or sucking type. Students, remember, in the basic common structure, 6 parts we find for the mouth of any insect. Here also initially all the 6 were there. But as the adults get changes to the kind of feeding mode which is different from that of larval stage, in larval stage all the 6 parts which were present started to modify when they enter into the adult stage. Because the adults will feed on the nectar of flowers which is in the liquid form. When it is in the liquid form, the siphoning or sucking type of mouth parts the animal requires, for which just a proboscis is enough. Now, when you look at here, the structure of labium, structure of labium, structure of mandibles, 3 parts. They are present, but they are very much reduced. Okay, they are very much reduced. But they have a very well developed proboscis to suck the nectar of flowers. So how this proboscis is formed? It is formed from the maxilla part. Okay, you know maxilla consists of gallia and Leucaena. So this gallia structures of 2 maxillae of right and left side, they unite, they come closer to form that tube-like structure. So when it is at the time of feeding, when it is at the time of resting, they separate out so that there is rolling or coiling of this maxillary structures. Okay, so proboscis plays a very important role at the time, at the time of feeding. So when it is striped, it is a condition that the animal is in the stage of feeding. When it is coiled, it indicates that the animal is at resting stage. So in all the 3 diagrams, you find generally the proboscis is coiled, indicating the resting stage of the fly. Now, labrum, as I said, it is reduced structure. Labium is also reduced structure. But the labial palps are said to be very well developed and they are jointed. Down in the picture when you look at, it is extended structure of the labium. Okay, towards the left side when you, right side when you see, so there is 2 extensions from the head region which is brown in color. So they are called as labial palps. The general function of labial palps is to assist the process of keeping the position of proboscis at the time of feeding. Okay, it brings in the adjustment of the position of proboscis, number 1. Number 2, it also helps in holding the soft parts of the flowers, that is the petals. So it presses upon the petals so that the proboscis is easily thrown into the region of nectar and it can suck the nectar. So labial palps are very well developed. Next, maxillary palps are present but they are highly reduced. You can see the diagram towards the right side, the green shaded one. So you have the the labial palps which are extended blue projections down on either sides of the coiled proboscis. Both the structure of maxillary palp, the labial palp, you have small yellow shaded structures attaching. They are called as maxillary palps. They are present but they are highly reduced, very short in size. Mandibles are totally absent here. Why mandibles are not seen in the organism? Because there is no need for either cutting of the food or chewing of the food. So mandibles are totally absent. this is the importance of the mouth parts. Students, remember, labial palps are very well developed, assisting in holding and giving position for the proboscis. Number 2, maxillary palps are also seen but reduced form. And proboscis is formed by the fusion of the galliae structures of the maxilla. So, we have understood that the pair of maxillae are joined to form the long coiled proboscis. And while joining the two galliae structure of the maxilla, you find the arrangement of the proboscis is like a zipping arrangement. Okay, they can open up and can close. You might have seen two zipper running sides. So similarly, you have here. So it is compared to the zipping structures because there is an interlocking between spines and hooks that are seen on the margins of two maxilla, that is two galliae. So galliae structures of right and left will have extensions of hook-like structures and spine-like structures. When they both come closer together, it forms like a zip. So when you zip up both the sides, what happens? The inside of which it will form a tubular cavity, a hollow cavity. So through which the nectar is drawn in. So what is a proboscis? It is a long coiled structure which is formed by joining the galliae of two sides to form a hollow tubular structures through which the food is taken in. What is the kind of food these organisms will feed upon? It is the liquid matter called the nectar. So maxillae having galliae forming the proboscis is important structure here. The labial palps that assist in giving position for proboscis is important. Then maxillary palps which are highly reduced in each side. These three parts alone you can find in the structure of the mouth parts in case of butterfly very commonly. Okay, labrum is present but it's highly reduced in its size. Students, remember, when the organism is at resting condition, proboscis seems to be highly coiled. But at the time of feeding, the extension of the proboscis to form a long tubular proboscis is brought about by the exertion fluid pressure by the blood into gallia. So gallia structure, that is the maxilla structures, will extend those two tubes to come together to form the proboscis is brought about by the blood that enters into the gallial parts, okay, giving the exertion pressure. They don't have hypopharynx or epipharynx. Reason is that directly the siphon, the mouth, proboscis gets connected to the pharynx region here. So no need of saliva here at all because the food what they feed upon is the liquid form of the food, that is nectar of flower and fruit juices. So that's how the arrangement of major parts got modified in the mouth parts of the butterfly. The last type of example under the insect trophy is housefly. It has sponging type of mouth parts. Students, remember, they do have the modified basic structure of these mouth parts. They do have 6 mouth parts in the initial stage of larva, but when they get into the adult stage, slowly they tend to modify the mouth parts. The sponging type of mouth parts they have because they directly suck up if the food is liquid. Sometimes the food may be in the semi-liquid form, solid form, so there is a requirement of conversion of solid form of food into semi-liquid food type. So that food is drawn up by the organism. The labrum, epipharynx, labium, hypopharynx, maxillary palps are present, whereas mandibles are entirely absent. So 5 parts are present, but they are in a modified form. Mandibles are absent here also, because there is no requirement of chewing of food. No need of puncturing of the body of the host. So labium is drawn to form a long, fleshy, retractile proboscis, like how we have found it in the mosquito. All these parts, labrum, epipharynx, labium, hypopharynx, maxillary palps, they're all fused to form only 3 structures. From top, we call it as upper side. We call it as rostrum or rostellum. The next part we call it as the middle hostelum, and lower part we call it as labellum. So we have altogether 3 parts which are modified parts of all these 5 major or basic mouth parts of the insect. So what are these 3 parts? Rostrum, upper rostrum, middle hostelum, and lower labellum. Rostrum is also called as basiproboscis. It is a broad, elongated, cone-shaped part which attaches to the head of the animal. And here it bears a pair of unjointed maxillary palps, representing the structure of maxillae. So the structure of maxillary palps and elongated cone-shaped structure of the rostrum or rostellum, which attaches to the head of the organism, forms the first part. Here, majorly the maxillary palps are getting modified. The middle portion we call it as hostelum or mediproboscis. It is the middle part of the proboscis structure. Here, it consists of a mid-dorsal oral groove and a ventral weakly chitinized plate called mentum. I repeat, proboscis structure in the middle region, we call it as hostelum. It has the part at mid-dorsal, the upper part, a groove-like structure, and ventral side it has got a membranous structure attached. Okay, groove and down is a membranous structure. There is a double-edged blade-like hypopharynx located deep inside this oral groove. Wherever the hypopharynx is there, as we know, it is associated with the salivary duct. So, the structure of proboscis in this area is a modified part of hypopharynx and labrum epipharynx region. These two together forms the salivary canals and salivary duct channels. Thereby, the saliva is poured more on the solid food to convert it into semi-liquid food. You know, houseflies generally visit the food which is rich with the sugar content, sugary substances. When it visits on a sugar a crystal, it will pour its saliva, convert that solid into liquid and then absorb. So that conversion process of saliva pouring is done by this hostelum region. So it's a modified part related to hypopharynx and labrum epipharynx region. The last part it has is down the structure of labellum. The labrum epipharynx, which secretes saliva and forms the channels of saliva, is associated with the food canals also to form that oral groove, okay, through which the food is taken in. Okay, the last part is labella or distal proboscis. When you see this structure, it is present down at the free end. It's a distal part of the proboscis. It has two broad flattened spongy pads. It is like this. Two broad flattened spongy pads. It is spongy because it can absorb the content of liquid. And this spongy pads inside will have series of minute channels which we call the pseudotracheae. These tracheae will open at the center with the mouth cavity. I repeat, there's two pad-like spongy structures at the distal end, seen which are flat, shows series of channels through which the food enters, called as pseudotrachea. All the structures will meet at the central point of the proboscis channel. We call it as the oral channel or oral groove. So through which the food from the surrounding is drawn into pseudotrachea, that will reach the region of the central food canal. Okay, so pseudotrachea will converge into the mouth cavity or the mouth opening, leading into the food canal. So thereby all the structures at this area of the labellum or distal proboscis region will act as the suction pads. So they absorb the content directly. Generally, the mouth pads here are said to be spongy, having labella and proboscis majorly. They suck the food if it is in liquid form directly. If it is in the solid form, it will drop saliva first onto it. Turning that food into liquid, it absorbs the food back. So the type of mouth parts present in the housefly is said to be sponging and then sucking type, showing rostrum, haustulum, labellum parts. So when you look at all these parts, towards the left side, you find the major basic parts. Towards the right side, the modified parts of the trophy of housefly in the diagram down here. So with this we are completing the second example also related to homologous organs. Students, we shall quickly understand the MCQs related to it. Question 1. Those organs which have basic similar structures but different functions are called as homologous organs. Answer is D. An example for homologous organs here are arm and a dog's foreleg, are teeth and elephant's tusks, leaf and phylloclad. Phylloclad nothing but modified leaf. D is all the above. Answer is D, all the above, because all are homologous structures. They have basic plans of similar embryonic origin. Then, homologous organs will explain which type of evolution here. It is divergent evolution. Answer is B. Homologous organs are similar in origin, similar in development, similar in function, similar in behavior. They are similar in origin because they use a common ancestor here for the divergent evolution. Answer is A. The term similarity in organ structure seen in greater diversity of which of it? So, similarity of organ is related to homology, because homo means similar, logy means study of similar organ structure is called homology. Answer is D. My God, I'm sorry. Which of the following sets have homologous organs in them? A. Leg of man, leg of horse, wing of bat. Wing of bat is forelimb modification. Leg of man is hind limb. Okay. So hand of man, tail of horse, wing of tail concept doesn't come at all. Next, C. Hand of man, forelimb of horse and wing of bat. C is the right answer. D, when you look at head of man, head doesn't relate to wing or leg of other organism. Question 7. Being all mammals, whales, monkeys, dogs, bats, etc. have some common characters. So they have some common characters in them, but they show some differences in their functions. This is due to divergence. Answer is C. 8th question. The concept of homology was introduced by who is the scientist? Richard Owen. Answer is A. So primitive type of trophi of insects are seen in which of the insects down? It is in cockroach, where chewing and biting type of mouth parts are seen, which will feed on the solid food. So answer is B. Last question. Formation of diverse species from a common ancestor. One ancestor is giving many species, so it is monophylogeny. So every organisms that we consider under homologous system makes use of one common ancestor. So we call it as monophylogeny. Answer is C. Well, students, the outcome of today's session is we have understood the role of homologous organs as the anatomical evidences in organic evolution. References includes web references of Wikipedia and Britannica.com, and book references includes Organic Evolution by Veerabala Rostagi, Evolutionary Biology by Veerabala Rostagi, Cell Biology, Genetics, Molecular Biology and Evolution and Ecology by Verma and Agarwal. Well, students, your queries and comments, please post them after watching my video in the YouTube channel in the comment box session. Thank you all. Take care of your good health during this pandemic time. And this particular question is very, very important. Concept is very important for your main exams. So most frequently asked or most repeated question it is of, both for the theory and practical concepts. Thank you all, students.